One of the most brutal things you can experience in love is watching someone get closest to you right before they start pulling away. Not after a fight, not after rejection, not after some obvious disaster. Right after a beautiful moment, right after honesty, right after vulnerability, right after the kind of connection that should have made everything clearer. That is what makes this pattern so hard to recover from, because it does not just hurt your heart, it hurts your sense of reality. You start asking yourself questions that do not have easy answers. If the intimacy was real, why did they go cold after it? If they felt what I felt, why did closeness make them more distant instead of more certain? If that moment mattered, why does it now feel like I am the only one carrying it? A lot of people never fully recover from this pattern because they keep trying to solve it like a puzzle. They replay the conversation, they replay the night, they replay every message before and after. They search for the exact sentence, the exact tone, the exact moment where maybe they ruined it without realizing. But sometimes the answer is not that you ruined anything. Sometimes the intimacy was real. Sometimes the closeness did matter. And sometimes the reason they pulled away is not because they felt nothing. It is because they felt enough to activate fear. Today, I want to walk through why avoidant people often pull away right after intimacy, what is actually happening inside them when that shift happens, and why the moment that felt most meaningful to you may have also been the moment that made them feel most emotionally unsafe. Stay with me until the end, because the last part is where this pattern becomes dangerous. Not just painful, but dangerous to your self-worth if you do not understand what it is doing to you. When most people think about closeness, they assume a simple emotional sequence. Two people connect, they open up, they feel safe. That safety deepens the bond. The bond becomes more consistent, and over time, intimacy starts creating security. In healthy dynamics, that is often what happens. But avoidant people do not always process intimacy that way. For someone with avoidant patterns, closeness can feel comforting in the moment and threatening immediately after. While the connection is happening, they may genuinely enjoy it. They may soften. They may become affectionate. They may share something honest. They may feel relieved to stop performing distance for a little while. And then later, when they are alone, the emotional meaning of that moment starts catching up to them. Now they realize you saw more of them than usual. Now they realize they let themselves care more than they planned to. Now they realize the connection is no longer casual in the same way it was before. It has weight now. It has consequence now. It has the power to affect them now. That is when avoidance often activates. Not because the closeness was fake, not because the tenderness was an illusion, but because the reality of what happened now feels harder to emotionally control. This is the first thing people need to understand. Avoidant withdrawal often does not happen after bad moments. It happens after meaningful ones. So what exactly is intimacy threatening for them? Usually it is not just the relationship, it is what the relationship awakens. Intimacy creates exposure. It creates emotional need. It creates longing. It creates dependency. It creates the possibility of disappointment. It creates the possibility of being hurt by someone who suddenly matters. And for someone who has built safety around emotional distance, those things can feel overwhelming very quickly. An avoidant person often experiences closeness as a loss of internal control. Before intimacy, they may feel composed, guarded, self-contained. After intimacy, they may feel emotionally stirred up in a way they cannot easily regulate. Now they are thinking about you more. Now they are aware of wanting more. Now they are aware that they are not as detached as they thought they were. And if they are not emotionally equipped to hold that state, the instinct is often to create distance fast. That distance is not always a carefully thought out decision. Sometimes it is almost reflexive, a nervous system response, a move toward emotional self-protection. This is why the shift can feel so sudden. You are reacting to the intimacy as something that deepened the connection. They are reacting to the same intimacy as something that made the connection feel riskier. Both people are responding to the same moment, but in completely different emotional languages. Another reason avoidant people pull away after intimacy is because intimacy changes the stakes. Before something becomes emotionally real, there is room to enjoy it without fully facing what it means. Attraction feels lighter when it is still ambiguous. Flirting feels safer when no one has clearly revealed how affected they are. Even emotional closeness can feel manageable if it still lives in a gray area. But once there is a real moment of intimacy, the gray area starts shrinking. Now, this is not just chemistry. Now this is attachment. Now this is not just enjoying someone's company. Now this is someone who can actually reach you, affect you, and potentially hurt you. For many avoidant people, that shift feels like danger, not because love itself is bad, but because deeper emotional involvement means they can no longer pretend they are untouched. This is why you will sometimes see someone become more distant right after the exact kind of moment that should have brought you closer. A vulnerable conversation, a tender night, a confession, a breakthrough, a day where the emotional truth between you becomes impossible to deny. To you, that moment feels like progress. To them, it may feel like the moment the connection became too real to comfortably manage. So they try to lower the stakes again. They pull back, they go quiet, they cool the energy, they reintroduce space. Not always because they want to lose you, but because they want relief from how emotionally significant you suddenly feel. This is also why avoidant people are often misread as cold when they are actually overwhelmed. From the outside, the behavior looks harsh, the messages slow down, the softness fades, the tone gets flatter, the openness disappears. Sometimes you even feel like they became a different person overnight. And if you are on the receiving end of that, it is almost impossible not to interpret it as rejection. Sometimes it is rejection. That does happen. But sometimes what you are seeing is emotional overwhelm disguised as detachment. They do not know how to metabolize what they are feeling, so they create space. They do not know how to sit inside the vulnerability, so they act less emotionally available than they actually are. They do not know how to stay open without feeling pressure building inside them, so they become colder than the moment itself would suggest. That does not make the behavior fair. It does not make it less painful. And it definitely does not mean you should excuse every hurtful pattern by calling it hidden depth. But if you are trying to understand why avoidant people pull away right after intimacy, this matters. The withdrawal is not always proof that the closeness was meaningless. Sometimes it is proof that the closeness was emotionally activating enough to make them want distance from their own feelings. And unfortunately, the only part you experience directly is the distance. There is another layer to this that people almost never talk about. Intimacy does not only create fear of losing someone, it also creates fear of being fully seen. To be emotionally close to someone means your softer parts become visible, your needs become visible, your insecurities become visible, your desire becomes visible. The parts of you that are easier to hide when things stay casual suddenly step into the light. For someone with avoidant defenses, that can feel deeply destabilizing, because once you are seen, you cannot fully go back to pretending you are untouched. Once you reveal tenderness, you cannot fully hide behind indifference. Once someone has felt your warmth, your care, your vulnerability, it becomes harder to go back to the safer identity of being the one who does not need much. I want to take a quick moment to thank everyone who supports Soft Mind. Every cup I share with you, like this Chloe the cat mug, Reminds me of how this community grew from one quiet idea into something warm and real. Each Chloe the Cat item helps me keep creating these videos, so if you'd like to support the channel, you can grab your own cozy mug at colabbmusic.com. Thank you for being part of this calm space. This is why some avoidant people pull away right after they were unusually open. They may replay the moment and feel exposed by it. They may think they revealed too much. They may feel embarrassed by how emotionally real they became. They may suddenly want to put distance between themselves and the version of themselves that let so much show. That is why the coldness afterward can feel so sharp. It is not always that they regret you. Sometimes they regret being that visible. And when shame gets mixed into intimacy, distance becomes even more likely. This is where many people make the worst possible move, even though emotionally it makes perfect sense. They chase the closeness harder. They feel the shift, panic, and immediately try to repair it. They text more. They explain more. They ask what is wrong. They try to bring back the energy from that intimate moment before it disappears. They want reassurance that the connection was real and that it is not slipping away. On a human level, that reaction is understandable. When someone goes cold right after vulnerability, your nervous system wants repair. It wants to close the gap. It wants to restore safety. It wants the person to come back and confirm that what happened between you still means something. But to an avoidant person, that pursuit often feels like additional pressure on top of the vulnerability they are already trying to escape. Now, they do not just feel exposed, they also feel responsible for your emotional response to the exposure. Now, they do not just feel close, they feel trapped by the closeness. Now, they do not just feel stirred up, they feel like they are expected to manage the emotional consequences of what was opened. And for someone who already fears being emotionally consumed, that can intensify the withdrawal fast. This is why the pattern becomes so cruel. One person reaches for more closeness to repair the pain. The other person experiences that reach as even more emotional pressure and retreats further. So how do you tell the difference between avoidant withdrawal and simple loss of interest? You look at the pattern, not just the distance. Loss of interest often feels flatter and more final. Less curiosity, less emotional charge, less engagement, less energy. The bond feels like it is slowly draining out because the person is no longer invested enough to keep it alive. Avoidant withdrawal often feels more conflicted than that. The distance is real, but the feeling does not disappear cleanly. There may still be signs of care, flickers of warmth, moments of attention, residual emotional charge that make the connection feel unresolved rather than dead. That instability is what makes the dynamic so addictive, because the warmth keeps returning just enough to make you think the intimacy meant something lasting. You start living for the flickers. You start measuring the whole relationship by rare moments of closeness rather than by the overall consistency of the bond. And that is where people lose themselves, because the real issue is not whether the chemistry exists. The issue is whether the person has the capacity to sustain intimacy without repeatedly turning it into confusion. Capacity matters more than feeling. A person can feel deeply and still not know how to stay emotionally available once those feelings become real. So what do you do if you are caught in this cycle? First, stop measuring the relationship by its best moments alone. Avoidant dynamics are powerful because the intimate moments can feel extraordinary, rare, earned, deep, almost sacred. And maybe they are real in that moment. But a relationship cannot survive on rare emotional access. It has to survive on what happens after the closeness too, after the tenderness, after the vulnerable conversation, after the beautiful night. If the bond keeps collapsing right after it becomes emotionally real, then the problem is not lack of chemistry. The problem is lack of safety. Second, Stop assuming that if you say the right thing, stay patient enough, or love carefully enough, you can prevent their withdrawal. You cannot manage someone into readiness. You cannot make yourself perfectly non-threatening to a nervous system that experiences intimacy as pressure. Third, ask a harder question, not just, do they care about me? Ask, can this connection remain emotionally healthy in the form it is currently taking? Because someone caring about you and someone being able to sustain closeness with you are not the same thing. That question is painful because sometimes the answer is yes, they care, but no, they cannot hold this in a way that protects your peace. And that answer can change everything. The deepest truth here is that intimacy reveals people. It does not only reveal love, it reveals fear, it reveals old defenses, it reveals what someone does when they are seen, affected, needed, and emotionally moved by another person. Some people soften into that, some people run from it, some people want it desperately and still pull away the moment it becomes too real. So if someone withdrew right after intimacy, do not rush to tell yourself that the moment meant nothing. Sometimes it meant a lot. Sometimes it meant enough to activate everything they have spent years trying not to feel. But also, do not turn that understanding into a prison for yourself. Because being able to explain someone's distance is not the same thing as being safe inside it. Their fear may explain the pullback, but it does not automatically make the pattern healthy for you to keep living through again and again. You are allowed to understand the tenderness of what happened and still admit that the aftermath is hurting you. You are allowed to see their fear clearly and still choose clarity over confusion. You are allowed to stop calling instability love just because the intimate moments felt profound. If this episode gave language to something you have been trying to understand, let me know in the comments which part hit the hardest. And if you want more calm, honest conversations about love, attachment, mixed signals, and emotional clarity, subscribe to Soft Mind. Some people pull away because they never felt much. But some people pull away because they felt too much and did not know how to stay open once they did. And knowing the difference can save you from blaming yourself for a pattern that was never fully yours to carry.